I have to say, I feel like a rock star. This is amazing.
Wow, so many wonderful humans out there.
Not so skeptical now, are we, about psychology?
Love life and enjoy every moment.
Thank you. I like having my toiletry habits exposed before I even begin. So far I've given this presentation before to one other person, and she said it was pretty good, so I'm feeling confident about that. Okay, so rewilding, what the heck is that anyway, right? So I just want you to just imagine this, right? A few weeks ago, I'm in a rainforest on the north coast of New South Wales. I've got 30 teenagers. And I'm standing at the edge of a little clearing in the rainforest, and out of the shrubbery emerges a small group of these teenagers. And they're covered in head to foot in ash and charcoal and mud, and a few ferns poking out here and there. And they proceed to sneak along very quietly and stalk down past me on the rainforest edge. And then somewhere down further in the gully, I hear this like raucous outcry of other teenage voices. And that's because they've got a base built down there, and their base is currently under attack from one of the other groups. And I look back to these teenagers, they've disappeared. They just sort of milled back into the forest. And this isn't a scene from the latest Hunger Games remake. This is what rewilding can look like. And so rewilding normally in a traditional sense is when you get like an animal or a plant and you reintroduce it back into its environment in a place where they used to exist but they don't anymore. But in my work with rewilding children, it's about putting children back into nature. In recent decades, science has confirmed a simple truism that we just ought to have known in the first place, which is that children are actually evolutionarily hardwired to thrive when they get plenty of time in nature. And if we think about that for a moment, each one of us is on the living spear tip of a long line of generations that's stretching back some 300,000 years or more. And every single one of our ancestors until very recently spent their entire childhoods completely immersed in nature. Except now they don't. So something like 3/4 of the children in England today are spending less time outdoors than prison inmates. And you know there's something wrong in the world when you hear a statistic like that. And there is. As we look around the world, we're seeing the signs of an emerging crisis in childhood mental and physical well-being. So just so we don't think that nature connection is something that's of concern to hippie parents who have children's names like Wild Wind and Clover Diva, I just want you to sort of see that nature connection is something that's fundamental and core to us as a human, as a species. And it has, when we don't have enough time in nature, it has consequences globally. And so just to give that some context, in late 2017, some 15,000 scientists from 184 different countries in the world released a report. It's a warning to humanity. It was their second warning, actually. We may not get a third warning. It may be our eulogy that comes next. And in this warning, the scientists spell out that because of the way that we do business with the planet, the impacts of our lifestyle upon the planet, it's bringing us to close to these planetary boundaries, these thresholds beyond which the planet just cannot support us any further. And so they spell out a series of actions that we need to be taking as a global community if we want to avert this calamity in the future decades. And one of these actions was really pertinent to my work because it actually said that they need to be increasing outdoor nature education opportunities for children. So getting kids outdoors in nature isn't just like really good for their mental and their physical well-being, it's actually critical for creating the next generation of adults who can have a whole different way of relating to the planet and make better decisions than their parents and their grandparents before them. Now, fortunately, children are born with an innate love for nature. We call this, biophilia. But 50% of the children in the world today are living in cities or urban environments where there's very little opportunity for them sometimes to get out and experience nature. And the next few generations of population growth on the planet are going to be happening in mega cities and other highly urbanized environments so nature for those people just becomes like an abstract, something they learn about at school in a homework project. What happens when children don't get enough nature time? Well, that biophilia that they're born with can then degenerate into what we might call biophobia. So biophobia can be thought of as like an aversion to nature. a sort of irrational loathing and even a sense of contempt for nature and natural places. And when this is allowed to occur on a societal level, it can actually manifest itself as a wholesale disregard of nature as nothing more than just a disposable resource for our consumption. So I think biophobia has probably been around with us since we transitioned from hunter-gatherers into farming communities, when we had the artificial schism between nature and human. But the science is telling us that we've arrived at the point where we only have a few generations in order to reverse this trend. So every child that we can foster that biophilia and get them back into nature is going to be critical for the trajectory of our society. Now, the great American nature essayist and naturalist, not naturist, John Burroughs once cautioned us that knowledge without love won't stick. But if love can come first, knowledge is sure to follow. And I think this is like where we've largely gone wrong in our approach to environmental education programs in our schooling system for quite some time, where we sort of load children up with all this information and expect from that there'll be this thirst for knowledge and hopefully they'll take responsibility of the planet. But where is the opportunity for those kids to actually have first-hand experience in nature? When do they get to form the relationship and fall in love with nature? So the work I do with Rewilding Youth through the Centre for Ecological Learning, we really believe in creating these authentic experiences for kids to get out and actually have first-hand accounts of nature and just fall in love with nature. And once they fall in love, I reckon that the rest will take care of itself. So in our programs, we work to a sort of core set of principles, and I'll just step you through some of these principles. Because, if you're even if you're just taking the kids out camping, or you're actually designing environmental education programs like we do, it's super important that those programs offer kids a heap of fun. If you don't offer them fun, you're in for a nightmare of a camping trip. Okay, I've seen teenagers like Sam here, young Sam here, stalking other teenagers around in a rainforest with these blacked out night goggles on you can see him wearing for hours on end, and no one stops to worry about whether the Wi-Fi is still working. In fact, at the conclusion of a 3-day camp recently, I overheard 16 and 17-year-old boys self-confessing to each other that they felt so happy and they were so just like stressless because they hadn't had their phones turned on for 3 days. Now, considering it's pretty much a crime under the United Nations Conventions for the Rights of the Child to separate a teenager from their phone for like 5 seconds, it really goes to the heart of how powerful nature connection can be. It can even outcompete Facebook and Instagram if you give it half a chance. Another core principle for us is the role of adult mentors. And I say mentors here and not teachers. And I say that quite deliberately because we really believe that the programs we run, they should be actually led from the children and not imposed from the top down as a teaching model. And so if you look at the way that children and adults perceive the world, we have a different approach. So like we will look at a tree, for instance, and we'll admire its form and its function, and we see its beauty aesthetically. But children will look at the tree and they'll be like, what's in it for me? What sort of gifts does the tree offer? Can I climb the tree? Can I build a swing in the tree? What can I do with the tree? So we have this fundamentally different way of perceiving the environment around us. And so for adults to be creating education programs for children, they need to be mindful of these differences. And so we create our programs so they have enough open-ended space in them for unexpected stuff to happen. So the children can actually fill the activities up themselves with their own curiosity-led learning outcomes. Also, we use younger generational mentors like my friend Tyler here. And that's really important too because they're young enough to be able to bridge the generational divide. And they will still work with some of the same language and the same memes and the same tropes as the younger generation do. And so they build up an authenticity, a trust between them, which is really important, and especially when you're working with teenagers. And really, if you've got dreadlocks and a long beard with a little bauble in the bottom of it, you're just super cool. And that's totally important because then those kids, they want to emulate your green values. And I'm starting to grow a little beard. I'm getting cooler by the day. Throughout our programs, we have these nature connection. I have these they're bushcraft survival skills that we run through all the programs we do. In this particular activity here, I sent the kids out, and their job was to build a survival shelter out of any sort of debris they could scrape up off the leaf litter and branches off the rainforest floor. You can see what they created down there. And so any activity like this gets a lot of attention from teenagers, and they get right into it without having to sort of issue any more instructions. But after they'd spent like most of the day building this thing, and they came back in, the idea was they would just finish up and go and have a shower. But they came to us and said, well, no, we want to sleep in this thing now. Well, we were working in the middle of winter, and the temperature that night was going to get down to about 1 degree. So why not? What can go wrong? So yeah, go sleep in it. So they slept in them overnight. And so when teenagers have skin in the game, when there's consequences to their actions, it just deepens the whole experience for them. And when I catch up with these guys years later, these are the sorts of experiences, these are the stories they keep wanting to tell, because they were so deep, they actually got woven into the cosmology of their childhood years. Okay, this is the point where I use my things. Has anyone tried to make matchless fire? I got a bit of smoke then, right? It's a lot of work, actually, but it's really intensely fun. And I've seen teenagers, like small groups of teenagers, working in a group around fire sticks like this to make a fire. And when they finally burn that little coal out and they can sit around those flames and just bask in the fire they've made, there's a real look of primal joy in their face. And also they've got blistered hands as well. But part of that primal joy comes from the fact that this is actually a skill set that we've been practicing for hundreds of thousands of years, right? This is a daily part of our ritual of life for just so many generations. So it taps into a muscle memory that's quite old. And so, especially for teenagers who are staring down like a dystopic future ahead of them, when they get to use something like these basic sort of fire kit like that and make fire for themselves, it sort of restores a sense of self-reliance and empowerment that's really important in creating the next generation of youth leaders. Little confession to make here is that I'm a bird watcher. So I like birds, and I realize that's not cool. But when I was a teenager, I knew that it wasn't cool to be at school and brag that you knew how to make bird noises like this. Wom, poo, wom, poo. Or that wasn't cool. That's not how you got a girlfriend in a regional high school in 1980, 80s. That's not how you got a girlfriend. But I have found that birds have got me out into nature. It's just so many hours. And so they're great ambassadors for nature connection. How do we make birds cool? Well, the answer is we use birds to find stuff which is cool. Predators. So once kids realize that they can use the bird calls and learn a bit of bird language, and that then helps them to track where predators like cats and snakes and hawks are moving through a landscape, well, suddenly birds are super cool, and they've got a whole new set of friends. And it's just really a matter of getting these kids to see nature through those new set of eyes. If you think back to the games that we were all playing when we were children, or maybe you're still playing, I bet there were games like hide and seek and chasies and tips and storm the castle and building cubbies. These are games that are played in one form or another across the world because they're sort of universal games. And they rely on a basic set of skills. These skills are the skills on how to be human. They're the skills on how to be a good hunter-gatherer. And so all of our programs sort of center around these basic set of skills. These are the kids I mentioned in the beginning of the slides with that story. They're about to go out and start building bases. It might sound strange to suggest that we should let nature be the teacher, but really that's the fundamental core of teaching models around most of the indigenous communities in the world, and for a very good reason, because it really works, and it doesn't exhaust you as an adult as well. So in this particular activity here, I've just set a 200-meter string line out through the rainforest. It goes all through the rainforest, right? And then we just say to the kids, rightio, you've got a blindfold on, you've got no shoes on, so I just want you to go slow and put a hand in front of your face so you protect your face from what's coming. It takes them a good hour to finish this course. But of course, some kids just want to go fast, I don't know why. They're showing off, but everyone's blindfolded anyway. But they take off, and that's when nature gets to teach their first lesson to them. Because about 20 meters in, there's normally like a branch or a tree trunk that hits them, and then they slow down. And at the end of the activity, we muster all the kids back up together and we say, how was that? And inevitably the feedback I get is they said, all along the way, I just felt like nature was saying to me, slow down, slow down, slow down, and take more notice. And I just want to leave you with one final story that really relates to how powerful nature connection can be, even if it's just a single experience in a child's life, if it's profound. So a few years ago, I was teaching, I was doing a nature education program for youth at the zoo kids in Victorian zoos in the Healesville Sanctuary. And these were kids across, they're urbanised kids, so they're from around Melbourne and the city. And so on the second night of the program, we took the kids out into the dark and led them out through this little forest track at Healesville. And Healesville has this beautiful forest, massive old trees. And we set them out along the track and we leave them there. We turn all the lights off. And they're positioned a good distance apart. They're 20, 30 metres apart from each other, so it's a real solo experience. And we start hearing the owls calling, and there's a couple of yellow-bellied gliders calling. After about 45 minutes or so, we pick them up and we bring them back in and we sit them around and we say, how'd that go with you? And they're all very quiet and they're very serene and introspective. But there was one particular boy I remember, I think his name was Tom, and he had this look, he was looking a bit like close to tears, and I thought, oh no, here we go, we've pushed this kid too far, and his father's probably a lawyer, and this is where it all comes unstuck. But he just said to me, I've never before in my life seen the stars. And for me, I see the stars every night, pretty much. So it was a profound awakening for both of us, because I got to realize, something I take for granted for this boy Tom was actually a super profound moment. And the reverberations from that moment just could flow through his life. I don't know where they take, but they flow through his life forever and hopefully take him somewhere good. And I think, everyone in the room has likely had at least one profound experience in nature that's affected them. And so isn't it just the right of every child born today or born tomorrow or born the next day? Isn't it the right of every child to be able to have at least one profound wild nature experience like that? And so really the question for all of us is then, what are we going to do to make sure that happens? And as you leave here and you go back to your homes over the next few days, I just invite you to do one simple thing, and that is to go out somewhere where you've got a little bit of nature around you, into a national park or just in your backyard really, and just sit quietly, leave your phone back in the house, and just sit quietly there for half an hour, or an hour if you're good and patient, and just do nothing. Absolutely do nothing, just breathe. And just pay attention. And nature will do the rest, because nature is the ultimate happiness drug. Thank you.